Hello and welcome to the podcast. Well, it looks like Keir Starmer and his government are getting even more unpopular, if that's possible. You may have noticed online a petition which is titled Call a General Election. The last time I looked, and it was a little while ago, the number of signatures on that petition was 1022948. 1022948. That's quite a big number, isn't it? And I suspect if I looked again, that number will have gone up. It's unlikely to have gone down. Why is this government, why is Keir so unpopular? Well, I think there are several reasons. I've talked about some of them before, as have other people. But let me revisit it and come at this from a slightly different angle, which you may find interesting. I'm going to take you to this article. I'm going to read just the beginning of it. It's like a scene setter, but I think it's really well written and I think it's quite thought-provoking. It's called The Psychology Behind Unethical Behaviour. It begins, on a warm evening after a strategy offsite, a team of executives arrives at a well-known local restaurant. The group is looking forward to having dinner together, but the CEO is not happy about the table and demands a change. "This isn't the one that my assistant usually reserves for me," he says. A young waiter quickly finds the manager, who explains that there are no other tables available. The group tries to move on, but is once again interrupted by the CEO. "Am I the only one annoyed by the view? Why is there construction happening today?" he demands to know. The waiter tries to explain, but to no avail. "You really need to up your game here," the CEO replies. The air is thick with tension. After the waiter walks away, someone makes a joke about the man's competence. This seems to please the CEO, who responds with his own derogatory quip. The group laughs. If you were present at that dinner, would you let the CEO know that you disapprove of his language and behaviour? Would you try to set a better example or stay silent? You're probably thinking that you would speak up and you would try and set a better example. That's what I'm thinking I would do. But how easy is it when the pressure is on? One of the things, just to sort of sidetrack slightly, that I've said for a long time is that doing the right thing is harder, but probably at its most powerful and game-changing when the pressure is on. Anyway, let's go on with this article. This is just the last little part I'm going to read. This scene encapsulates three psychological dynamics that lead to crossing ethical lines. First, there's omnipotence. When someone feels so aggrandized and entitled that they believe the rules of decent behaviour don't apply to them. Second, we have cultural numbness, when others play along and gradually begin to accept and embody deviant norms. Finally, we see justified neglect, when people don't speak up about ethical breaches because they're thinking of more immediate rewards, such as staying on a good footing with the powerful. And it's talking about ethics, but one way to think about ethics in relation to morals is that morals tend to be personal. And by the way, some research suggests that very young children, toddlers, even younger than that, seem to have some sense of right and wrong. But of course, whether that research is accurate or not, I think it is. I think there's something in it. There's still the element of socialization, the culture that goes on. But by and large, I think people sense when things aren't right. Not everyone, but the majority. And ethics, that's an extension. It's like group morality. It's what we consider culturally to be right. And of course, that group can be quite small. It can be a team. It can be a country. It can be a corporation, a department, and a government or a party within that government. And what I'm in case you haven't guessed already, pointing out here, is that I think we're seeing a sense of omnipotence with this government. Keir in opposition worried me a lot. And in part because I didn't know what he stood for. He seemed to be waiting. When he did speak, I didn't really understand what he meant particularly, because it was neither one thing nor another often. And of course, he's flip-flopped around. And people will do that. So let me also attempt to be fair. But this so-called landslide victory, I believe, has fueled a sense of entitlement, has fueled a sense of them and us. We're special in this government. And you people, well, not so much. And I'll pick up on that in a little while. And then we've got this cultural numbness when others play along and gradually begin to accept and embody deviant norms. I really believe that we're heading in entirely the wrong direction in this country if we're not careful. We've got an out-of-touch leader who is showing signs of grandiose behaviour and knowing exactly what's right for everyone, and I think unaware or lacking self-awareness or not able to admit that maybe he's wrong and out of touch. All of that isn't good. And if that transmits to a greater number of people around him, then we are going to have a situation where it's the emperor's new clothes, but no one is there to call it out, apart from, it would seem, quite a lot of people in the population, but not within the party. Let's pray that people call these behaviours out who are close to Keir before things go much further. And then justified neglect, the last one, linking to that, because people may want to stay on a good footing with the powerful, Keir, and perhaps those around him as well. And is apparently, Keir, quite ruthless. This is not a good combination. And I believe that the seeds of this were there before. I think we're now further down the track of things going awry for many of us. And I also, however, still believe this can be nipped in the bud, hopefully in a way that is, well, from within, that Keir realises, so the people around him call this out. Anyway, let's move on to some of the specifics that have been going on. Labour launched farmer tax raid with no idea of its impact. Chancellor accused of negligence over changes that could decimate family farms. If you're in the UK in particular, it's unlikely that you have failed to see headlines like that. I'll go on with that article. Labour carried out no impact assessment before launching an inheritance tax raid on farmers, the Telegraph can reveal. The Chancellor's failure to carry out a full review has cast doubt on the government's claim that only 500 farms a year will be hit by inheritance tax changes from 2026. It comes amid a row over the policy with Labour accused of underestimating how many landowners will be taxed, and Sir Keir Starmer's own MPs calling for exemptions for family farms. Now, what we have there is just what I was talking about, that at the moment at least, quite a number of people haven't fallen into, well, I better shut my mouth territory to curry favour with Keir and those close to him. So more power to you. Also, this impact assessment, I believe that same charge was levied about the winter fuel payments. So there's a bit of a pattern there. Just do what we tell you because we know what we're doing. We're clever. Then, I want to go here to this. This is from Full Fact. Is Labour right to claim there's a 22 billion black hole in the public finances? The reason that I mentioned that is because, of course, Labour is justifying a lot of what they're doing because of this mysterious 22 billion pounds black hole. And let me go to this bit of detail here. You see the additional pressures identified were as follows, and there's a list. You can stop the video and read that, or look up the article, of course, yourself. I'm not going to bore you by going through all of it, but what I want to do is focus on the bit that I've highlighted. Normal reserve claims. 8.6 billion. As explained below, we don't have full details of what this includes. And there's been a lot of toing and froing between the Conservatives and Labour and other parts of the government about this 22 billion, each kind of accusing each other or accusing each other to a degree, as you might expect. But this 8.6 billion, that's a substantial amount of money, of course. And to continue with the article, talking about that 8.6, it says here, as outlined above, the second biggest single source of additional pressures was listed as normal reserve claims. This refers to department spending funded by Treasury reserves rather than a department's actual budget. But we don't know what specifically was included in this figure. Full fact, this is from where I'm reading this article, raised concerns about this in a letter to the Chancellor ahead of the budget, in which we stress the importance of honesty, openness and accountability. Words you may have heard me use before in the past in terms of leadership and also in terms of this government. And of course, this is highly important, partly because we should understand what that 8.6 is made up of, is constituted by, but also because in part this black hole is being used to justify all the things, or many of the things, that Labour is doing. So we should know, we have to know. Accountability, transparency. Then let's go here to this video, homing in, just humanising, or perhaps looking at some dehumanising in terms of the winter fuel payments or lack thereof.
Billy, thank you very much for joining us this morning. Are you seeing already an increase of older people coming to your food bank worried about the heating and eating?
We've seen an increase since July, August this year, and it's something that we've never expected this. We've been running food banks for nearly 12 years now, and every week is really different. They get different referrals from social services, schools, doctors, and we've seen a huge increase in just the inquiries on pensioners in Hammersmith and Fulham and Kensington and Chelsea, where, as you said, they're just over the threshold done, and they don't know what to do next, because that fuel allowance makes the difference of heating and eating during November, December, January, when it gets cold and the flats and houses are absolutely freezing. So yeah, we've seen a huge increase, and it's something I can't get my head around why Labour have done that.
I mean, that almost beggars belief. That's grim. Right now. Happening right now in the UK. So perhaps now then isn't a good time to revisit this headline. £4,400 heating claim for second home amid pensioner winter fuel payment cuts. That's from September 2024. What was it about? Oh, just someone claiming heating on expenses for their second home. Who was the someone? Oh, that's Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, or as some people are calling her recently because of something to do with her CV, Rachel from Accounts. Let's then look here, another headline from September. Everything you need to know on why they're proving so controversial. What's that about? The Prime Minister's acceptance of freebies and hospitality has dominated the political landscape this week. But what exactly has Sir Keir Starmer been criticised for? What are his party's concerns? And what has he said about it? Well, I'm not going to get into all that, but let's just read this little snippet here. Sir Keir Starmer has come under scrutiny over the past week for the more than £100,000 worth of gifts he has accepted. I'm sure you can remember that. I'm sure he'd rather you forgot that. Anyway, what then in terms of Labour's position in the country? they appear to be, or at least Keir appears to be, a lot less popular than when he started, but he wasn't that popular when he started anyway. And people say that, well, 80% of people didn't vote for Labour. That's not strictly true. I've dug into this article here. I'm going to read it to you. More than 49 million Brits were registered to vote as of December 23. The 9.7 million votes out of 49 million people means that roughly 20% of the voting population voted for Labour. That's carry on from an earlier part in the article. Therefore, according to this calculation, roughly 80% of the voting population did not vote Labour, or as stated in the second claim, voted against Labour by voting for other parties or not voting at all. And that's what some people have been saying. So 80% didn't vote for Labour, but it would appear that's not true. However, according to the BBC, of the 48,214,128 registered voters, only 60% of them, roughly 28.9 million people, actually turned out to vote. The 9.7 million Labour voters out of 28.9 million people means that more than a third of people who did vote chose Labour, whereas 2/3 chose another party. So although it would seem it wasn't 80% of people who didn't vote for Labour, 2/3 didn't. And that's quite a lot of people. And of course, the way the voting system works at the moment, then Labour still got in. But as I and other people have said before, it was because of the constant screw-ups that the Tories had manifested upon us and themselves. And so the sort of landslide, you see, that can make you think that you're the popular choice. It can make you have that sense of entitlement, that self-aggrandizement can creep into your thinking and behaviours. I wonder if that's part of what's gone on. But 2/3 didn't vote. I'll bet you that right now the number of people who wouldn't vote for Keir and his party is at least 80%. Then let's look here. Yvette Cooper plans to expand non-crime hate incidents despite Pearson row. And the thing it says there about the threat to free speech, irrespective of what I might think, you might think about the particular tweet by Alison Pearson, is very real. I think this is so dangerous because the definition of non-crime hate incident is woolly, to say the least, and it's based on opinion. It's like trying to grab blancmange. It's based on a perception of someone, and that someone, as I understand it, may not even have to be the recipient of this perceived hate, which is probably the wrong word to use anyway, but that's another story. And if you then are okay, you know, you like people say, well, there's no criminal aspect to this whatsoever. That report is still filed. It's still on your record, and then it can show up, depending on the search that's done in the future, perhaps by a potential employer. And as I say, it's opinion based. That is so frightening. And whilst it is important, of course, that we do have laws that stop people inciting violence, we've got to be so careful that the creeping disease that this could be in terms of our society is not to be underestimated, not at all. And then let me, by total coincidence, quote this about the Gulag Archipelago from Super Summary. This alienation manifests in many ways, with the people described as feeling they are disconnected from one another and the society they inhabit. At the beginning of the text, Solzhenitsyn describes the life of a free person in the Soviet Union. These people may be free in that they are not in prison, but they are not free to express themselves. They're scared and suspicious. as they are unsure whether anyone they speak to might be an informer. They are forced to guard their words and shy away from speaking too loudly on any matter out of fear of being sent to the gulag. If we're not careful, we're all going to end up being so scared of offending someone or so scared of saying something that someone decides for their own reasons to be offended by, that we will get sent to the gulag. We will get a knock on the door, and consequences will ultimately follow from that, because at the very least it's filed on your report card somewhere that at any point in time can be accessed by certain individuals, and that may be used in evidence against you, perhaps going for that job. And what happened to the ability to joke, to take the mickey? That's so important. It pricks pomposity. It deflates ego. And also that banter, which again these days can be seen as a bad word, that banter can create team. It can allow us to laugh at ourselves and laugh at each other, and laughter and humour are so important. But this stuff, this non-crime hate incident, could also stop that. It has already had an effect on comedy, but thank goodness some people at least are pushing back on it. Anyway, then let's go here. Honour of my life. Rachel Reeves becomes UK's first female Chancellor in 800 years. That's good to see. That's a nice thing. Good for her. On that level, I'm very happy for her. Let's then just read on in the article. The most telling sign inside number 11 of how male-dominated this role has been is that there is only a urinal in the toilets of the Chancellor's private office. Sources close to Reeves told ITV News that work will begin soon to remove it. So Rachel can continue the tradition of taking the piss out of the rest of us.